So what you're going to hear today is the question asked in the context of the city of Riverside, and then if you attend tomorrow's event at 4:30 in the afternoon at CAFÉ Aroma in Idlewild, you'll hear the context in the mountain environment where trees are abundant and natural, and then UCR Palm Desert offers yet a different landscape. We're fortunate to have three people who basically eat, breathe, and live trees, coming at trees from very different points of view. We've got Professor Darrel Jenerette from my department, who has studied urban environment for many years. We've got Jason Sohigian, the Deputy Director of the Armenia Tree Project, and we've got Ryan Berk of Parliament Chocolate. And to each of them, trees play an important role. The handout or the flyer that you read said, trees are clearly important. Well, you know, I'm actually, I'll agree that trees are important because if it wasn't for a single tree, we wouldn't be here right now in Riverside at the University of California. And you all know where that tree is, right? The corner of, very good. So I would say trees are important, but in general, is it clear that trees are important? Well, I think I'm going to leave that for the panel. Before I set up the panel, though, and call the panel up to give their presentation, I'd like to thank the various sponsors of this, who are many and have given generously. The UCR Center for Ideas in Society provided the primary and seed funding. This idea had been thrown up at various possible funders in the past, and they were the first ones brave enough to say they thought it was a good idea. And it's funny, once you've got somebody like Center for Ideas in Society saying it's a good idea, getting extra funding is not a problem. The UC Global Food Initiative has paid for the videotaping and some other aspects of the three-day event, the UC James Reserve, UCR Palm Desert, and the CAFÉ Institute, which I've already talked about. Also, it takes a village to pull off a multi-day, multidisciplinary event like this, and I'm particularly grateful for Catherine Henshaw and Carol Lerner, whose attention to detail and passion for the project could not be matched. I also want to thank Deborah Pagliaccia, the managing director of CAFÉ, who many times stepped in and helped me take care of details through my stumbling. And I'm sure I've forgotten others in the audience. Anyhow, it does indeed take a village. I'd like to call the first of the panel members up to give their presentation. Ryan Berk is, as I said, the co-founder of and co-owner of Parliament Chocolate in Redlands, and he's going to provide his perspective.
All right, it works. How's everybody doing today? Good? Good, good. Thank you all for coming. We really appreciate it. Let me figure out how to get out of here. All right. So I'm just going to give you a quick background of who I am. My name is Ryan Berk. I'm born and raised in Southern California. Loma Linda, Redlands, Yucaipa is my home, so very close to here. Very familiar with this sort of terroir and everything around here. So I actually am a chef. So I got started in the culinary industry when I was about 14 years old and have been in the industry ever since. And so I started working at a small little Thai restaurant in Redlands called Benjarong or Rama Garden, Thai cuisine. Started working for a different culture other than my own and understanding sort of the aspect of Southeast Asian cuisine. Worked for this family for almost, I would say 8 years, and realized I needed to learn the European approach to cuisine. So I ended up going to culinary school. Right out of culinary school, I got a job at one of our local casinos and thought I was going to be this big chef, celebrity chef, but definitely not true. Then I just jumped on a buffet line and started slicing prime rib at the buffet. So learned a whole lot about, okay, you got to work pretty hard to sort of move it up. So I worked at this casino for almost 4 years and finally became a chef after 2.5, 3 years, and managed about 4 outlets or 4 restaurants, and had about 40 cooks working under me. So worked really hard, tirelessly, for 10 to 12 hour days, 6 to 7 days a week. I never saw my wife, Cassie, who's over there, which is the partner in our company. And sort of felt like my soul was sort of depleted and had no connection to the food. So coming from Redlands, it was a citrus growing community, farming community, and I always felt really connected to that sort of farming approach. I always knew I wanted to go back and open up something. I just didn't know what it was. And so we got a shipment of frozen fish into the casino one day with some packets of dry ice. I pulled the dry ice out of the packet, smashed it up with a hammer, and I knew about the process of making ice cream with liquid nitrogen or dry ice. I had just never done it. And so I ended up making some ice cream base at work and made some ice cream out of it. And I took a bite of it, and the texture wasn't like anything I've ever had in my life. It was incredible. And like I said, coming from Redlands and knowing these farmers and just being a part of this sort of farming community, people that respected the ingredients they worked with, this is what I knew I wanted to do. So I brought the idea to my wife, hey, let's open up an ice cream shop in our hometown. And she said, okay, let's do it. And so we opened up All Minute Ice Cream almost 5 years ago. If you've heard of All Minute, we have 4 locations now throughout Southern California. And that sort of drove us to open up Parliament chocolate. So people would always ask me why we didn't have a chocolate flavor on the menu. And truthfully, I didn't respect the industry. I didn't respect where the products were coming from, the knowledge that there was utilization of slave labor, and just the growing practices. And so I ended up going online one day and finding a great source for cacao beans. I emailed the person that sent me the cacao beans and said, hey, can I fly down to where you're at, which was Guatemala and Belize? And I ended up jumping on a plane the next week to Guatemala and meeting with cacao farmers. And so I'm going to sort of show you guys a little video of what I do now. It's been about 3.5 years since we opened Parliament Chocolate, based out of Redlands, and the ethics and sort of what we want to bring to the table based around cacao and cacao development and what we call direct trade. Up a little. Oh. Okay.
Nadie sabe plantar, nadie sabe sembrar. Ese cacao es de los ancestros, no sé qué sé, yo no sé nada de eso.
It's almost like there is a wave, like a huge wave that's bearing down on cacao.
It's still pretty cool.
Yeah, eso puede ser por el color del grano.
Well, this is what you get with good oxygenation.
That's looking really good. We have this unique opportunity down here where cacao originated to aid in the attempt to preserve this genetic variety.
That's the whole new wave of what chocolate making is, developing a process together and working together based around that. They're all of us trying to achieve the same thing based around this perfect chocolate bar.
Look at this. Look at this. Yeah, qué bonito esto. Estamos ya muy agradecidos que ustedes han conservado esos cacaos.
We have a lot of work to do to build infrastructure to support the farmers here.
Detrás de ese producto es gente. Tenemos mucho por hacer todavía.
We don't put in the work right now to figure this out. They're going to end up planting other volume varieties, and we're going to lose all this business. That's why this stuff is so complicated, because nobody's ever looked at these trees, nobody's studied them, and nobody's helped these people. I mean, I think we're all on the same page about this being about the people here, right? That would be great, because I'm not here most of the time by myself.
The chief came out with his bow and arrows, and I think in Spanish said, "What the fuck are you doing here?" So, welcome to the jungle.
In the near future, it's all up. We're trying to create this whole new market.
We're not doing charity markets, right? Like, this is a way of, like, sort of reinventing the way business is done.
Yeah.
They need us, and we need them.
These are fantastic. These are incredible.
So that's just a little teaser film of sort of what we're doing down in Peru right now. We just brought up our first containers of cacao. So I'm truthfully in Parliament, I produce about 16 metric tons a year of cacao. What you saw there were the pods, and then in those pods are the beans. And so we design chocolate very much like a fine wine, based around the terroir, genetics, and cacao actually goes through a really rigorous fermentation process as well. So that pulp on the outside that you saw that was white is extremely, extremely sweet. And as soon as you pop that pod open, it pretty much starts fermenting right away. And so what we're trying to do is teach these farmers to process the cacao at the farm with higher quality and higher respect to the ingredient itself. In turn, we can actually pay 300 to 400% more above market value. So pretty much both of us come out in the end positively. And so that's pretty much a little bit about myself and my background, and I'll give it off to the next speaker. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you, Ryan. So, I mean, obviously, certain values associated with trees there. Now we're going to move the camera, twist the lens, look at the prism another way with Dr. Darrel Jenerette, who's going to talk about his work on urban plant systems.
Good evening. Thank you for the opportunity to come here and tell you a little bit about the work I do. I'm an ecologist by training and expertise. I'm an unusual ecologist in that I'm an urban ecologist. So when I came to ecology as a field, I wanted to go out into the wildlands and look at the deserts and look at the forests. And in my research, starting out in my PhD program, I ended up turning inward. This was in Arizona State University in Phoenix, in a large city there, and we started looking at the city as itself as an ecosystem, and what are the trees doing there. And we spent more than a decade trying to find out, how do trees influence the city, how does the city influence the trees, and what's going on with this ecosystem as a city. So that's been a lot of my research that I've done in Arizona, and then since I've moved here to Los Angeles, greater area, and Riverside in particular, I've continued that line of research and now extended out to trees in North American cities and trees from around the world. So in this work, I think I'll give you two directions that I've done some work on, and one is the concept of ecosystem services. Ecosystem services are the benefits that people get from processes that the ecosystem does, and common processes are food production, climate regulation, or just spiritual value that people get from the trees or the vegetation that they have out there. And these are the ecosystem services that are provided. Within the city, you can get a lot of ecosystem services. There are a lot of trees, and they're doing a lot of workforce in there. And that's been an increasing effort to try and repopulate, to revegetate urban environments is to improve these ecosystem services. Some of the work that I've done with this is particularly looking at climate moderation. So urban heat island is a easily recognized form of climate change. Cities are warmer than the areas outside of the city. If they have the buildings and the cars and people in there, that makes it hotter than it is if you were just outside of the city by itself. So trees and vegetation more broadly, can serve to cool the urban environment. And this can happen by up to 5 degrees, can cool the environment, which can be pretty dramatic. We've seen this cooling happening in Phoenix and in Los Angeles, here in Riverside, and throughout North America, that when you have more trees, you get a cooler local environment that cools off the neighborhoods pretty substantially. Just a couple findings with this is this cooling is strongly correlated with socioeconomics and race within neighborhoods. If you have lower income neighborhoods, they have less trees and they have hotter environments. And we see this throughout the world, that we have just this sort of environmental justice issue with trees, and the microclimate comes about through the way that cities are formed, and we can think about managing that. These have real implications in cities that have, in neighborhoods in Phoenix that have less trees and that are hotter. You can actually, the residents there report having heat illnesses up to half of the residents there. So these people get really hot in Phoenix in the summer. In higher income neighborhoods where they have lots of trees and the environments are cooler, this self-reported heat illnesses goes down to almost zero. So this contrast between the ecosystem services, this cooling of the environment, and has health implications for it. And that's a big thing that we've thought about. At the other end for ecosystem services are the dis-services, or the dis-amenities that trees can provide. Trees require a lot of water, especially out here. And how do we balance this demand for water and this demand for cooling or other ecosystem services is a big interest in urban ecology right now, and in urban planning more broadly. So that's one line, is this urban ecosystem services, and trying to understand the role of trees within the ecosystem services. Another line of research we've done is trying to just measure the diversity of trees in the urban environment. And surprisingly, in several talks I've given now, I describe cities as hotspots of biodiversity. There are more trees in greater Los Angeles than there are in all of California. We have almost 500 different tree species can be found in the city. If you walk around greater Los Angeles, you can find all these tree species. And I've called the urban trees of Los Angeles and Riverside as the most diverse urban forest in the world. You can bring trees from all over and they come here. We have the jacarandas, you have the crepe myrtles, and you have the southern magnolias. You have trees from all over the world come here. And so with this, now I've even come to say, this Southern California urban environment has the most diverse trees of anywhere in the world, more than any other forest. We bring trees from Africa and Asia and South America. Those trees from those different biogeographical provinces would never be found in the Amazon or in Southeast China, but we have them all here together. So in some ways, I think of this as the most diverse forest in the world. And so this diversity of trees, why people plant all these trees together, has driven a lot of our research in trying to understand this. And then from this talk, it was really exciting that what's the value of the trees? Why are people planting all these trees in the city? And what's the value for that? There's been a huge push lately to quantify the value of a tree. There's a lot of programs by the U.S. Forest Service and fire departments to identify what's the dollar value of a tree, and a lot of it is based off of quantifying the ecosystem services. What's the health benefits you get from having trees, from cooling? What's the health benefits from reduced air pollution kinds of directions? Try to balance that off with the water costs, components to it, the aesthetic value. People like to look at the beautiful flowers of trees out there, and it's been fascinating to think of this valuation of a tree as something that is driving it. So there's a big push in California by the California Fire Department to give money to plant trees, and it's based off of these kinds of valuations. I think there's a big problem with some of this valuation, that we don't really have a good sense of how to quantify what are these benefits and how do they vary among different trees. The species certainly influence what they do and the ecosystem services they provide. at the other end, people themselves differ in how they value this. Some people might very much value the beautiful flowers, and other people might really value the cooling, and some people might value the food produced from some of these trees, especially in Riverside here. And so that value is not this this thing outside of us that we can put onto the trees, but it's something that comes from every individual, and people that have diversity of values for that tree. So that's been a big direction for my research, really, is trying to identify what is the value of a tree in a city. And we don't quite have the answers yet, but it certainly is an intriguing puzzle. Okay.
Okay, yet another perspective and a perfect segue to our third panelist, Jason Sohigian, Armenia Tree Project.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you. I'm really glad to be here. Thank you for the invitation, Professor Elstrand. I tried to put together some photographs to try to tell the story of what we do in Armenia, the Armenia Tree Project. I mean, a lot of these photos, there's a story behind every one, but I'll try to walk through it quickly so we can open it up to a discussion. And some of these photos were taken by me recently during my field visits to Armenia, or by some of our team members in Armenia. So first, a little bit about our region. Armenia is located east of Turkey, north of Iran on this map. The country is 12,000 square miles in area, about the size of the state of Maryland or country of Belgium. Half of Armenia has an elevation of 6,000 feet above sea level. The highest point, Mount Aragats, is 13,000 feet, and the capital city of Yerevan is 3,000 feet above sea level. Armenia has a population of 3 million, with 7 million in the worldwide diaspora, and it's a diaspora that's highly engaged with the country, especially since independence. Annual per capita household income in Armenia is $1,300 per year, which is about $4 per day. The country is ranked on the Human Development Index at 85th out of 188 countries, which is comparable in category to country of Albania. And while there's poverty in the rural areas, the city of Yerevan is very cosmopolitan, with a European feel, cafes, wine bars, lots of tourism and cultural sites. But our work at Armenia Tree Project is geared especially towards the rural areas where we found there's the greatest need. Armenia is recovering from a legacy of being a part of the Soviet Union for 70 years. The country, or really its second largest city, faced a massive earthquake in 1988, and the country declared independence from the Soviet Union in 1991. In the 18th century, our forest cover was 18%, and it was down to 11% by the last forest inventory in 1988, and it was estimated at just 8% a few years ago. And our forests are primarily oak, beech, hornbeam, and pine trees. There were high levels of deforestation after independence. The country was blockaded, and there was a lack of alternate fuel supplies, and people were forced to cut trees for cooking and heating fuel. Another environmental issue facing Armenia that's also been a driver of deforestation since the 19th century is mining, primarily for copper and also gold. Now, what are some of the values that people place on trees? Here's a few that we've observed in Armenia. Official statistics say 65,000 cubic meters of wood are used annually for cooking and heating, about 20,000 cords of wood. but the actual number is probably 3 times higher, taking into account factors like illegal logging. Forests provide habitat for birds and animals. Some of the more interesting types are bezoar goat, lynx, and the Caucasian leopard, which is shown here in camera trap photos from World Wildlife Fund. Deforestation has caused landslides and flooding in some mountainous rural areas. Trees can have a mitigating effect on these types of natural disasters. And of course, the fruit is one of the more iconic and desirable attributes of our trees. In Armenia, apricot and pomegranate are the most well-known and really delicious when in season. Trees often line the streets and public parks and provide air purification and much-needed shade in hot summers. And many craftsmen use wood for handmade goods like game boards, tourist souvenirs, and children's toys. And of course, there's many other values and benefits from trees, including climate change mitigation, which is no small benefit. Now, our first program in 1994 was called Community Tree Planting, planting native seedlings grown in our own nurseries at public sites throughout the country. We placed a big emphasis on fruit trees, growing as many as our nurseries would allow, and the most common types we plant are apricot, peach, apple, and pear. By the time we realized urban plantings were not going to reverse the tide of tree loss, we embarked on larger scale forestry in 2004. Our forest sites are located in the northern part of the country in rural mountainous areas that faced massive tree losses in the 90s. At the same time, we realized tree planting wasn't enough, and we introduced Armenia's first environmental education program by publishing a teacher's manual and offering hands-on lessons to students. So our trees provide many benefits or ecosystem services like clean air and food security, and another huge co-benefit is the creation of tree planting jobs in rural areas burdened by poverty. Now, by special request from Professor Elstrand, here's a few slides showing some before and after photos of our planting sites. Since 1994, we've planted more than 5.2 million trees. From that total, 500,000 were fruit trees, or about 10%. The fruit harvested from our trees has been more than 5 million pounds. And we have 70 full-time employees in Armenia and hire dozens of workers during the plantings in spring and fall. And we've planted at more than 1,000 sites like this all throughout the country. Now, I wanted to close with a quote from our founder. Carolyn Mugar is an Armenian-American philanthropist and activist from the Boston area. She's not a very public person, but it was her vision and her dedication behind the scenes that drives the Armenia Tree Project. Here's something she said when we reflected on our 20th anniversary. At the time of our founding, people were saying, how can you plant trees when we have so many emergency needs? Our answer is, it's exactly at the moment when it seems there's no hope, when you have to plant a tree, which is all about the belief in the future. It was a very bleak time because that's when the blockade started, and we traveled to the countryside and saw the deforestation, and we said we have to do something about it. Thank you.
Stay on stage and start populating. Okay, I'd like to invite the speakers back. We've heard 3 diverse and interlinking views of the value of trees. We'll have about 15 minutes of moderated discussion, and then we're going to open up to Q&A for you guys. So this is just to sort of, get the juices flowing in the audience so you can ask the questions that you want to ask of this esteemed group. So the first question I'd like to ask the panel, and anybody can answer this if they want to, is an observation that we made when we were writing the grant proposal, is that it seems like trees are really important in culture in just a variety of different ways, cultural stories. So Adam and Eve's adventure in the garden involves a tree. Newton was supposed to have been inspired about gravity by being hit in the head from an apple. Likewise, Buddha received his insight by sitting under the Bodhi tree. George Washington was reputed to have said, I cannot tell a lie, I chopped down the cherry tree with my own hatchet. So trees seem to play an interesting role in culture in just a variety of different ways. And I'd like to ask the panel if they think that contention is true. I mean, is there something special about trees? It's not like we get the same thing going on with birds or fish. Or is it just a bunch of hooey for me?
So yeah, definitely. Oh, does this work? Hello? Okay. So for me, I mean, trees create everything. We would not be here as human beings without trees. So, I mean, to grasp onto the understanding and the development of trees and push for agroforestry approach to growing trees along with the farmers and along with myself as the producer and hopefully giving you guys a product to the consumer that's been interpreted through all those methods. Trees, I mean, are really what we are as human beings, and without trees, we couldn't be us.
Any other comments?
Well, sure, I would
Yeah.
add into that cities worldwide are intimately connected with trees. It's hard to imagine a city with buildings and all of that, but still having no trees there would not be a place anyone would want to live. So I think that trees are intimately connected to what we are as a society today and historically throughout all of our history.
Jason?
I guess, I mean, I can reflect just thinking of just the image of the tree of life that is just, you know, an icon that's used in so many cultures, and in our culture, we see it in, you know, manuscripts and from medieval times. And so I think you're right. I think trees have a huge presence in our existence, and I think the panelists reflected it.
Okay, thanks. Okay, so following through on the theme of, you know, we live in Riverside, and, you know, there's some comments already about the urban environment, but does anybody want to add anything more about trees in the urban environment, or anything about trees in Southern California's you know, expanding development?
Well, it's the diversity of people and what they want that I think is driving what people think about trees and policy for trees. And there's a lot of policies around trees. You can think of the Million Tree Project in Los Angeles, and there's another one in New York. There's a lot of these big tree planting initiatives that people are spending large amounts of money to add trees into the cities. And how we can decide to do that and how we can plant them to have the most benefit and how we can plant them so that they'll be sustainable. These trees will require water, and they require ongoing maintenance. You just can't put a tree up there and let it just go. You need to prune it and maintain it. So I think there's a big role for policy and how we can decide on trees. And then this variation in values is really important too. Some of our colleagues that we've worked with, they've described, like, while many people like trees, in some of these low-income neighborhoods that have a lot of crime, they're afraid of trees because it provides a place where criminals can hide and avoid detection. So, like, where you are can really influence what you feel about trees and how you'd want them in your environment. So how we get these plants into a city and how we can make better cities is an important challenge.
Anything else? Oh, yeah, go for it.
So myself as a business, my idea is, how do I start utilizing trees that are native to Southern California in my products? How do I start sort of transitioning that where we don't have to utilize as much resources? So start looking into native varieties of, let's say, spruce, or something I can flavor stuff with, or juniper berries, or something that grows naturally in the environment that I can utilize to create a unique product out of. So in this last year, I've been really pushing towards what grows naturally in the environment that we have in front of us which is, there's all kinds of stuff. I mean, it's thousands of varieties of different things that I can work with into ice cream or chocolate, which makes things extremely unique and viable and necessary for us to start moving in that direction. Yes.
Can I add a rejoinder
For sure.
to that? Sure.
Yeah.
Because urbanization and native trees is something that a lot of people think about, and it's a useful. And a lot of people pick their trees based on whether or not they're native. The one thing that we have about a city is you can have trees from anywhere in the world, and they come from anywhere in the world. And if you want to think about sort of balancing out these ecosystem services and some of the disamenities of them, then some of the native trees are not going to be very effective. Like around here, most of the native trees are riparian. They require a lot of water to provide their services. And where you could go to other regions, there's trees from the Mediterranean and Spain that are not riparian, do not require the amount of water, but do provide these ecosystem services. So balancing out like this native component versus this non-native component is really interesting. And how do we do that? Certainly the native trees provide habitat for other plants and organisms, but how do we really pick the trees for making a more sustainable and just environment is something that we continue to wrestle with.
For sure.
So, Jason, a question for you that comes out of this then is that do you have any thoughts about the balance of native versus non-native tree planting in Armenia, and what kind of policies your group might be going forward on that?
We've had a definite focus on planting native species. I mean, that's been a part of what we're about from the beginning, and our trees in our nurseries are grown from seeds collected locally, and it's all local. We don't introduce new species in Armenia, but I mean the main factor is invasiveness that we're really concerned about, and not introducing anything that's going to have negative effects on other species in the environment. So we're trying to do things as naturally as possible with our project. No bamboo.
Okay. So I'm going to ask one more question to the panel. Then I'm going to let the panelists just give them an opportunity to ask each other a question, and then I'll open it up. So the question I'm going to ask for the panelists is, when is the best time to plant a tree? And I know Jason has an answer for this.
Well, yeah, I mean, we've talked about, there's this proverb, best time to plant a tree is 20 years ago. Second best time is now. So, I mean, one of the things we sort of joked about when it was our 20th was we were just grateful that our founder realized this 20 years ago and started planting then. And it was a time of real scarcity in Armenia. And people thought she was, crazy to do it. And she did it, and now the project has grown and is delivering many more kind of co-benefits down the line.
I totally agree with Jason. 20 years ago is where we needed to be, but we need to start now, and we need to start teaching our children now. We have to. It's not whether or not we want to, but we have to. From the video that you saw, 17% of the rainforest is already gone. That is how we live, how we survive on this planet. And so, and we have to do it together, and we have to work hard at it. It's not going to be easy, but we need to start doing it right now and replanting. And so one of the big things that we're promoting with these farmers in Central and South America, Southeast Asia, is agroforestry approach, where you don't just plant a cacao tree, but you plant everything else based around that as well. Hardwoods that you can harvest in 20 years, papaya, guava, anything else that you can utilize. And theoretically, these farmers can harvest off of it, but you're reenacting what was already there, but off of something that you can utilize any time of the year, multiple times. So rather than just one or two harvests a year. And so really it's important that we start tomorrow and teaching everybody that we have to start utilizing what we have on this planet and the regions and the visions that we have to go for.
Sure, I just second that and third that now is probably the best time to plant a tree. Since I've moved here in 2008, it's been a pleasure to see some of the parks spring up around here, and contrasting like Endolka and Bonaminio, which have just been recently brought online, and new trees there. You can see in 20 years that these will provide a lot of shade and environmental benefits, comparable to places like Fairmont right just down the road with these huge trees and lots of shade cover that people enjoy all year round. So sooner the better.
Okay, so before we open it up to the audience, I'd just like to ask the members of the panel if they want to ask each other a question before we go for the audience. Anything anybody's said or done?
Sure. So
Yeah.
you bring primarily native trees, but how do you balance that with these fruit trees that are probably not from Armenia?
Yeah, I mean, well, we're growing fruit trees that have been kind of grown in Armenia historically, so they may have an origin in Asia, like apricot, but it's kind of a iconic fruit in Armenia. But there's nothing very exotic among the types we're doing. It's a lot of stone fruit, some pomegranate, but it's, we're trying to replicate the local kind of ecosystem and tree types that are planted at the locations where we're doing the work.
And that actually goes on to you. How do you select trees in urban areas, especially Southern California, that you feel would be beneficial to this area and for the growth?
So, and we have a couple projects now looking at this. Is how do you pick a tree? Not just for today, because we can think of a lot of changes in the future too. Climate changes would be one. The changes in air quality would be another. How do we pick trees that can not just live now, but would live in 20 years from now, with the projections of Riverside becoming more like Palm Springs and Los Angeles becoming more like Riverside? How do we select the trees that can best provide the services there? So again, we look to, I look to think about the trade-offs and the balance, and I think the trade-off concept is a really powerful one. We want to have the services such as cooling and fruit production and just beauty. We want to reduce the negatives. We want to reduce the water costs. We want to reduce the maintenance costs of these trees. So finding ones that can hit that sweet spot has been something that we keep looking for.
Okay, any other comments or questions to each other? I thought that point's really good, and maybe we need a conference on this topic of actually, I mean, it is of interest, right? Because you can, here we have the world's most diverse forest, and actually we're living in an age where we can get the information to help us pick and choose what's the best product and move forward on that with all these questions about water and air quality and, what's good for your product and all that. And so, that sounds like it's a topic that's worth thinking about.
Sure. But at the other end, too, so that there's this benefit one and this services idea, but then just this intrinsic value of trees. Some people will pick a tree just because no one else has it, and they want to be the unique one. They have this tree that no one else does, and just increasing biodiversity. And how do we allow for these individual desires to come together with these societal desires is something we need to wrestle with some too. So an idea of a conference on that would be great.
Yeah. Definitely, we're going back to Center for Ideas in Society. Okay, should we open up?
For sure.
Okay, so let's see. Does somebody have okay. Carol Lerner's going to, okay, I saw a lot of hands go up. Let's start over here. That one was up first, and then here, and okay. Pick this. Okay. No, that guy, I think he was up first, and then that gentleman, and we'll try to sweep across the room here so I don't miss anybody. Yes, sir.
I thought that was interesting about the diversity in Los Angeles compared to the rest of the world. And I've noticed even here, I'm looking out my window and I saw a ring-necked dove. I've seen a mannequin. These are birds I haven't seen. I've been in Fullerton. I've seen flocks of parrots. I hear them in the background, even in Riverside. Are these trees also induce a lot of diversity in the avian bird life too?
That's a great question. So we don't really know enough about what these trees are doing. All of these trees are not in their native environment. These tropical trees like a jacaranda, it is not used to having a very hot and dry summer in its environment. And so how it's actually functioning is not clear. How they interact with other organisms also is not clear, and certainly an area of interest, both for the organisms that we enjoy, like these birds, but also potentially for diseases that are being spread around too. Like from our citrus disease, the citrus greening disease is one in particular it's potentially causing havoc on us. So that's an area that we need to explore more, is the interaction of trees and other forms of life in the cities.
Okay. Good observations. I'm a bird watcher.
Could you mention anything about chamal ashes? For example, what's happening in Norco, I think they're removing chamal ashes because they cost a lot of money to the city of Norco. Same here in Riverside.
I'm not particularly familiar with the chamal ash issues going on. There's a lot of maintenance issues of trees, and there's a lot of costs for maintenance of trees. So I guess that I have to leave it at that.
Being a longtime Riversider, I can comment briefly on that, and that's that I know cities have changed their policies on what kinds of trees are going to be replaced with the same species, and when certain species go down, they don't necessarily replace them. I live on a street that's got some beautiful cypresses, and when they're dead, they're gone. Okay.
Well, you can also say that with some of the iconic Southern California trees, like the palm tree, is one that's not being replaced anymore either because it's gone out of fashion. So
Right. I think it has to do with cost of maintenance in some cases. Yeah. Okay, let's get Georgia and then sweep around.
So, one of the first conversations I had with Nora was about invasive species and how horrible they were. But you don't seem to be concerned with that, right?
Well, I wouldn't go that far. I mean, I think there's in our native habitats, invasive species around here are certainly wreaking havoc. And as a traditional ecologist, 20 or 30 years ago, people would say, how can you even do ecology in Southern California? There's no native habitats left. But we still have these ecosystems that are doing things and functioning. So there's a lot of things that we can learn from them. I think for a lot of the urban trees, many of them are not going to be invasive, and that they require a lot of irrigation water. And so it's not as a problem. There are some trees that have invasive qualities to them. So,
Any other comments?
do you have invasive plants in Armenia?
Well, I mean, we did have a case where we worked with a partner organization that was growing a tree that was, known to be invasive, and there was sort of an argument made by botanists in Armenia that's in certain, environments that are very harsh, say it's a roadside, where it may not have a chance. Now that may be different in California, but where it may not have a chance to spread kind of risk, it might be a way that a tree could actually grow where nothing else would grow in that application. So I mean, there's been some argument made, and some people don't have problems with invasives or non-natives. So we've encountered it, but we really try to not get into planting those types.
Oh, his hand, and then back this way.
When I saw the email about this, the title, I was really excited. And one of my clients, she's a cardiologist. She sent it to me. And I'm a consulting arborist. I'm also a board member for the Inland Urban Forest Council. And in I think it was 2011, I wrote an article. What's a tree? If you Google Inland Urban Forest Council, you'll see different things like the ecosystem services. And I do a lot of work for insurance companies and for attorneys when a tree is damaged or destroyed or taken from eminent domain. And we use what's called council tree and landscape appraisal method of tree appraisal. There's three basic methods. There's cost, market, and income approach. And you talked about the income and cost. The income from the fruit. Some are valued because of timber. And then there's contributory real estate market value. The ecosystem benefits is really cool. If you really look at the
iTree. You've probably seen the iTree suite. There's one called iTree Design, and you can see a Google image of your own property at your own house, and you grab a tool off of there, and you circle around your home, and then you pick a tree by genus, species, and diameter, and you place it where your home's at, wherever you want to place it around the home. And it'll show you a model of growth over maybe 10, 20 years, 15 years. And it'll also show you the stormwater retention benefits that create in the city. We call those avoided costs. And then it'll show you the savings in cooling and also heating if it's a deciduous tree. Where I struggle is trying to figure out how to estimate canopy cover for, like, let's say an apartment building or a shopping center like the Tyler Mall. I have aerial photos of the Tyler Mall here in Riverside, and they're little tiny puffballs. And it bugs the heck out of me if you go on Irvine and the trees are cared for beautifully. So in 1992, I wrote legislation on proper tree pruning for the state of California, Government Code 53067. We passed out pruning standards to all the public agencies in the state of California through CAL FIRE. And so when I see trees topped and butchered, it just infuriates me. So with all these people here, pretty soon we're going to be at the city hall doing a PowerPoint. I'd love to see some stakeholder support, because we've got to change the attitudes. The trees are valuable. Dr. Kathleen Wolf does a tremendous amount of studies on showing patients can heal better with the use of trees and nice landscapes. Schools have higher reading, math, and one other, math, reading, and English scores that have, they take aerial photos, they look at all the green space around the tree and compare it. And I think it was Chicago suburbs to trees with a lot of blacktop, and they showed those higher test scores. So she's done it with crime. Look at two identical buildings with green space, the other with blacktop. More domestic violence, less crime over here. It's really a neat study. So if you want to read about Dr. Kathleen Wolf's work, it's very interesting. She's a social scientist from the University of Washington. She goes all over the country and speaks. So I hope to see all at City Hall when we present our try to improve the level of care that the trees are taking, are happening in Riverside, and maybe we can change the attitudes. And this is great. Thank you very much for having us tonight.
Thanks for making your contributions too. I think that was pretty awesome. We'll see if the panel has anything to add to that.
Sure, I think these kinds of findings that you're talking about that are been seen repeatedly, where this dose of nature can have all of these kind of benefits. And now the scientific interest is why. We don't know why trees improve test scores or improve well-being when you look at them, and I think there's a big interest in trying to uncover some of these underlying mechanisms of how trees actually provide these important benefits.
Okay, we have a question here.
Yeah, I kind of
wait for the microphone so that people can hear us. Thank you.
Thank you. I kind of see the two of you as the flip side of a coin. You're working with an economic incentive alternative to the people in the rainforest, whatever rainforest that the cow is growing in.
Yes.
So that you give them an economic incentive to keep the rainforest and with management of the species, so they may harvest whatever hardwood is in 20 years, selective harvesting, and interplanted with, I'll call it annual production.
Yes.
And so I can see how that's a win-win for everybody. You have the opposite problem. You had everything deforested already. So what was your founder's economic problem she was trying to solve first, since it'd be a slew of things? When there's nothing there, how do you keep them from not chopping down the growing trees if they need it for firewood and cook? How do you keep the population from migrating and become a massive immigration problem for the next country? Are you trying to keep them from starving that winter? What was her, beauty is great, and I love beauty, but that probably was not her first.
Yeah, I mean, I think when the project was started, I mean, I wasn't there, but I don't think she was thinking 20 years down the line, but I think she was thinking, let's just start now here. And I've heard her say, you know, just when something seems very, very large, just take the first step and then the second step and it will come. So I don't think she had a grand vision at the outset, but I think she's a very kind of hopeful and sort of positive thinker. And so she just said, let's start doing something. And, you know, we're realistic about the use of wood in Armenia. I mean, people are still in villages using firewood. And we're not actually even now thinking 50 or 100 years down the line. But I think in reality, we're actually planting the forest that people will be using for heat in 100 years in the rural parts of Armenia. So in a way, we're kind of paying it forward for the next generation. And one of our goals is that, you know, there's more of a concept of sustainable forestry in Armenia, which there really hasn't been until now. I think there's some talk about it from us and also from the government foresters. There's interest in it. It's just a matter of resources, training, sort of changing worldviews. I mean, in Armenia, we also deal with this issue of the tree topping. This is a pruning technique that they use in the capital city. This is a really historic city that's like almost 3,000 years old. And they completely remove all of the canopy of a tree. And this is the way they care for trees in the capital. So, I mean, there's a lot of kind of change that needs to take place. Another area that we've gotten into is just education, just trying to educate the public, the kids, adults on, you know, why trees are important, how to take care of trees. And I think the younger generation, it's pretty intuitive to them, and they don't have as much of a kind of a survival kind of mentality that people who grew up in the early years of independence had. So I think the tide is slowly changing. So that's a little bit of, I think, how we're experiencing it.
And then, sorry, I'm just going to jump in on a little bit of sort of, so one of the big things is, I mean, cattle is a pretty lucrative business down in Central South America, and that's a big reason deforestation is happening, definitely cattle. And so going back to those farmers and saying, hey, maybe if you guys take an agroforestry approach where you're planting more than one thing you can profit off of, maybe then it could be a viable solution, and replanting an actual forest is important. So another thing from what we're doing from that video that you saw is preserving ancient wild genetics of cacao. So a lot of these cacao varieties that are growing in these communities and these farmers are growing are all introduced. Whereas, I mean, you're in the middle of the Amazon jungle where you have wild, unique cacao varieties that are growing in your backyard already. And so a lot of these varieties are getting cut down. And so a big thing that we're trying to do is preserve these unique varieties. And who knows, I mean, it could make amazing chocolate as well, which that's another big part of what we're trying to sort of approach is, does it make good chocolate? And if it does, then let's try to preserve it as soon as possible. Instead of introducing these other varieties that like USA Group, which, I mean, they do a great job, but USA Group's introducing these other varieties like called CCNs and high productivity, but they're not indigenous to the area that you've got these cacao varieties already growing in. And so we're trying to say, hey, you guys have amazing cacao right in your backyard that's already growing there. Let's plant it and see what happens. And so we take it back to one of the local universities, we plant it, and cacao grows in about 3 years, and then we make some chocolate out of it, and it makes great chocolate. And we say, hey, you guys, this is from your ancestors. This is your true cacao, and so let's make chocolate out of it.
Hi guys, thank you. I work at Moon Valley Nurseries, and we specialize in growing large trees and installing them. If you live anywhere in Southern California, Phoenix, Houston, you've seen the tree we've installed. I have a question for you, Doctor. In so far, like historical drought cycles for California and the Southwest, how have you seen the tree selection change, and have you seen them change even recently with the new rains that we've been recently having? I mean, firsthand, I've just been like, everyone's like, oh, I can plant, again, finally, Xeriscapes out,
Yeah. A lot of the urban trees, from my perspective, has been sort of muted from their drought response. I think the drought over the past 5 years has gotten people thinking much more about drought-tolerant trees and drought-tolerant landscaping directions for that. I'm not.
And historically?
And historically, I don't know of any research that's really looked into how cities have responded to droughts in the past with their trees. I think one area of interest that urban ecologists has been wanting to look at is to engage much more with the nursery providers such as yourself. So I can go out and we put our plots down in the city, we can measure what trees are out there, but then we can give surveys to people and say, well, what kind of trees do you like? But like the central point of this is the nursery industry, where you're getting trees and you're making the tree stalks and then putting them in. I mean, I'm just as interested in what you're doing and how do you respond to the drought, and like where do you see the future of trees?
I mean, we've had experience in Phoenix and Vegas, obviously with the housing downturn and all the foreclosures, all the houses that were left vacant for many years. The only thing that lived were mesquites, African sumacs, Museum Palo Verdes, these really desert trees, and we've seen the uptick in them just because they grow fast and they can get by on one water in a month. So I mean, those things have those selections have grown substantially, but I mean, things like the Indian laurel, the Ficus nitida, and still sort of like the industry standard, just because of fast growth rate and blocks out the sun.
Right. It's really we did a survey once where we took nursery catalogs from about 1900 until 2000, and then did a textual analysis of what trees were being offered, and two things came out of that. One was that the diversity of trees that the nurseries are offering in Southern California has been increasing over the past century. And then another thing that really fascinated me is, like, consistently on this list over the past century, if we look at the top 10 trees being offered, one of them is the giant sequoia, but it doesn't live here. It's an iconic California tree, so I can imagine why the nursery industry has it in the catalogs. People will buy it, but then it just doesn't live. So it's interesting between what people can do and what they want to do as the drivers, as well as what your industry does as a supplier of choice is just fascinating.
Yeah, I mean, there are some things that I never recommend, but there are people who insist on having them. Just like say that's a fast food restaurant for bugs.
A cacao tree.
Right.
What about water? Recently they've talked about how the water from Shasta Dam feeds all of the nut trees in the San Joaquin Valley, and flows to Southern California where we have the ornamental trees. So how do we solve the competition for water between crop trees and trees that are used for landscaping and climate change in our urban environment?
That's the $64,000 question there. It's how do we address that? And economics alone is not going to solve it for us. A golf course will pay more than any farmer can ever pay for water. And we can't let it just be on economics alone, I think. That's going to lead to a lot of disequities. I think we can try to manage our trees better. There are certainly areas of the city that have a real need for more vegetation. And what that means is they have a need for more water on the landscape, and other places might not so much. How can we preserve some of the rural existence in California and the huge industry of these agricultural in the Central Valley and other places of California, as well as provide for water within the city that's a huge question. I don't have the answer for it yet.
Come back to Palm Desert Talk and ask that question again and see what kind of response we get.
I think a big answer is what you're doing right now. And we're teaching each other, we're learning from each other that it's necessary what types of trees to plant, what types of trees to grow, and the fact that you're like you said, tree nuts do retain a lot of water. So let's start moving over to other crops. And so just the knowledge base that more awareness is provided, that's what's necessary. And so the fact that you're bringing up that question is important. And so in 10 to 15 years, hey, maybe there's another type of crop that doesn't retain as much water and you could utilize something else. Let's try to see if that works and if we can create an industry based around that product. Or myself as somebody buying tree nuts for ice cream or chocolate doesn't utilize that as much and starts moving away for something that's more viable and resourceful that's local. So,
okay, we've got time for one more general question from the audience and over here. And then I think we're going to, is there anyone else I could do two more? No. Okay, she's going to take, okay.
We get a critical mass of tree huggers, tree lovers, because there's several issues, like you mentioned, the cattle production. If we could eat less meat, because it's supply and demand, and the fruit trees in Armenia, that they probably improve the health of the people. And maybe you could find another philanthropist who would, work with stoves that don't cause wood smoke, because wood smoke can be a real health hazard, and then maybe insulate their homes better or use heat exchangers. But there are people here, and then there are other events tonight. Maybe people who wanted to be here couldn't be. With the arborist over there, if we could all kind of connect with each other and then branch out with other people that we know, and then create an organization that would appreciate the value of this, and then the educational work, like as an arborist, because I've seen trees that have been butchered and hacked up because people don't know what they're doing, and you have to know how to help the tree grow, that's like what it's going to take in terms of water and what it needs, like bugs, if you're fast aggressive for bugs. So maybe we can all kind of sign up and connect with other people and start a group.
Okay. So yeah, I think that's a good ending question. You guys want to make a comment on that before then we'll just go into informal conversation.
Oh.
Okay. Okay, well, I think that's it. Thank you all for coming. If you'd like to thank the speakers. And they'll be around for a little bit if you want to come up and meet them. Thank you all for coming. Great questions. Great speakers.